imagine being 9 years old and learning that someone wanted to kill you, your dad, your brothers, and your mom. That's what I found out when I was 9 years old. It all began on a perfect summer day. It was the end of summer, August. It was hot, sunny, not a cloud in the sky, and we spent all day at the beach. And everything was ideal until that night when everything changed.
My uncle was a police officer, and he worked the midnight shift.
My dad left for work just like normal. He hadn't gone probably half a mile from our house when a car pulled up behind him, pulled out alongside him, and he was shot through the driver's side window of his car with a shotgun. The shotgun blast tore through his face and ripped off his lower jaw.
Before he lost consciousness, he wrote, "Not an accident." He realized that they were trying to kill him, and he feared for his family's life.
On that summer night, my childhood ended. I was never alone again. We were guarded 24 hours a day. Everybody had a gun.
We were fenced in.
We had an attack dog. We had a sniper on the roof with a long-range rifle.
You couldn't go out.
I had hidden a steak knife under my mattress, and I would just lay there and listen. I just knew that the people who shot my father were not going to stop until we were all dead. Next door to our house, there was an old graveyard. It sounds morbid, but it was actually this beautiful place to go and play. There were these old trees that were perfect for climbing, and grassy lawn to play tag and hide and seek, and we spent a lot of time over there. Falmouth, Massachusetts was the ideal place to grow up. Every summer day, we would get up in the morning, my mom would pack a lunch, and we would head out to Old Silver Beach. By the end of the summer, we'd all be brown as berries and just relaxed and happy. That summer, it was me, my two older brothers, Eric and Sean, my dad, my mom was studying to be a nurse, and then my cousin Kelly, who was helping out my parents take care of us kids. She was there to have fun, but babysitting was how she earned her rent. My father was a police officer, Dad's first day in uniform. In his uniform, my dad looked incredibly handsome, I thought. He looked like a movie star to me. He seemed invincible.
My Uncle John was a guy that you didn't mess with. He took his job and his position very seriously.
The John Busby I fell in love with was an athlete. He was handsome. He was very self-confident. He was one of the nicest fathers. He was a wrestler on the ground kind dad. And a hold my little girl close kind of dad. John always gave us the sense of safety and that nothing would happen to us as long as he was around. August 31st, 1979 was what changed our lives forever. Nothing was ever the same.
August 31st, 1979. This was the Friday, the start of Labor Day weekend. We were out in the driveway painting my dad's car. This was my mom's way of getting us out of the house that night so that my dad could sleep because he worked the midnight shift. And this is a photo that my mom took of me that night. When I was growing up, it was really hard for me to look at because I would look at this girl and I would study her face and I would think, what is that girl thinking about? Like, what is her life like? Because it felt like after that night, that childhood ended. So that night, my dad, got up to get ready for work. My brothers and I would have been in bed.
When I heard the knock on the door, I was watching Benny Hill. And in fact, I was laughing. I can remember.
I heard someone screaming or crying. And, at first I thought it was the TV. And, I woke up and I came out of my room and I saw my dad's friend Rick Smith was there, and he was in uniform. And he was talking to my mom, and she was crying and screaming. And she kept saying, no, 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 no. And she kept trying to push him away from her.
I said, Polly, there's been an incident involving John. And she goes, what happened? What happened? And I said, he'd been shot.
I made a noise. I remember making a noise and falling back against the wall and sinking down.
I was saying, what's wrong? What's going on? And she didn't even acknowledge that I had come out of my room.
There was a great deal of confusion. We knew something bad had happened to him.
And I told Kelly, I'll call you as soon as I know what's happening. And the next thing I knew, I was in the cruiser. I could see lights everywhere. And I could see John's Volkswagen riddled with holes. And I thought to myself, this is bad. This is really bad.
By the time we got to the hospital, there was a doctor and the nurses, and he was in a triage unit.
The doctors were all over him, and he kept beckoning that he wanted to write.
My dad managed to write a note. He said, Polly and the kids, not safe.
When he wrote that note, I knew there was one person in town that was capable of trying to kill John. And that person was capable of killing his whole family. It felt like I was in a storm, and I didn't know how bad that storm was going to get. Or if any of us were going to be safe again ever.
Else.
At the Falmouth Hospital, they'd never seen anything like that. They
disappeared.
When John became aware in the recovery room, his eyes fluttered some, and then he started going from tube to tube. And then he realized he couldn't talk. And I saw a look in his eyes almost of, I can't talk. And then he saw me sitting there, and he wrote, "Don't leave me like this." He didn't want to be on a respirator or be an invalid like that. And if the choice came, I needed to let him go. I needed to let him die. I said, you can't leave me here. You can't leave me with these 3 kids. I can't be left alone. You have to stay. You have to come back. We'll make it.
He couldn't speak. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't eat. He couldn't even drink water. I mean, he couldn't do anything because it had wired shut what was left of his face. Once I saw him, I thought, wow, they really meant to kill him. And I remember going to bed some nights and I would just lay in bed and think, my dad? Everybody likes my dad. Who could want to kill my dad? My father knew the instant that he was shot who was trying to kill him, and he was able to communicate that to the officers who were there on the scene.
When I first saw him, he was shaking like a dog. He was holding the towels up to his face, and I asked him, who did this, John?
And he got out a pen and a notebook that he always carried with him, and he wrote, "Not an accident, Mel Rainey."
John did not see who shot him. but he knew exactly who would want him dead.
Melvin Rainey was in the trash hauling business.
He had contracts all over Cape Cod, and it was very lucrative.
He was a convicted arsonist. He had a reputation of getting even with individuals by sneaking in the night and burning properties. His favorite saying was, "I smell smoke."
I smell smoke, which meant, without directly threatening, it meant there's going to be a fire in your future, your house, your car, whatever. I'm going to burn something of yours. Melvin Rainey was also suspected of murder. He was suspected of killing 3 people. And in 2 of those cases, the bodies have never been recovered. Melvin Rainey was married to a woman named Wanda Medeiros Rainey, and in 1971, she went missing. He claims that he dropped her off at the bus station and she was never seen again. About a year later, a teenage boy in Falmouth named Jeff Flanagan went missing. He was dating a 17-year-old girl who had been babysitting for the Rainey family, who Melvin was also interested in.
Jeff Flanagan was found shot to death. His body was recovered in a cranberry bog directly across the street from Melvin Rainey's home.
And then a former employee of Melvin Rainey's, a 17-year-old boy named Paul Allward, was set to testify against Melvin in a grand jury arson investigation. The police promised that he would be protected. They escorted him to the Martha's Vineyard Ferry, where he could go to, where he had some family, and stay there until the trial. He got on the ferry. He didn't get off.
Melvin Rainey basically walked free on all of those accounts. I think because people were afraid to prosecute him. And I'm talking about policemen afraid of him because they had families and they go to bed at night and you don't know if he was going to burn the house down with your kids in the house.
I knew that the police chief's car had burned his yard. Everybody assumed that it was, Melvin, but nobody could prove it.
I think Melvin Rainey considered himself untouchable, and that extended to his immediate family. So if the police tried to give a ticket to anyone in his family, he would march into the police station and have the ticket torn up and have it erased from the logbook. Well, my dad was either brave enough to take on Melvin Rainey, or he was foolhardy enough to take him on. If you broke the law, he didn't care who you were connected to. You were going to get a ticket, you were going to go to court, so he had run-ins with them. My dad was conducting traffic at a roadblock at a fatal accident, and Melvin Rainey's brother, John Rainey, was there in his semi. And instead of waiting for the scene to be cleared, he just decided to drive straight through the accident scene, and he actually hit my father with his truck. He went to his house and arrested him and charged him with assault and battery with a deadly weapon.
And just prior to that court hearing, John Busby was shot. I thought instantly that Melvin Rainey had shot him. And now we're going to start after Melvin.
I think there were a lot of cops on the force who wanted to go straight to Rainey's house and just drag him out. But there were a lot of other people who were in positions of power, who were really too scared to do anything about it.
I would challenge anyone to go to any police department and ask the question, if one of their officers was shot in the line of duty, what would they do? And I can tell you the response will be, they're not going to stop investigating that crime until an arrest is made. This did not happen in the town of Falmouth when John Busby was shot.
This is the police log from that night. The local paper does the log of accident, fight in progress, disorderly group, noisy house. At the hour of my dad's shooting, there was nothing. They didn't put it in. They took it out of the police log. They've got everything else in here. Dog barking, 2 drunks near Russell and Falmouth Heights. Every single teeny thing in town is in here, and for some reason, the police log doesn't state for that night that a police officer was shot.
To my knowledge, the Falmouth Police Department never interviewed Melvin Rainey regarding the John Busby shooting.
I've often wondered just exactly how this little guy could get away with the stuff that he got away with without even being questioned.
It was clear to a lot of us that there was something behind the scenes that was much more powerful than Melvin Reaney. Melvin Reaney had something on someone, whether he was paying people in envelopes or whether he had pictures from some sort of sexual act. He clearly had so much control that the police didn't go after him. Nobody was going to do anything about a crime involving Melvin Reaney.
Michael John did not want to die. Michael John wanted to live, and live to take care of what happened to him. Their biggest mistake was they didn't kill him. That was their biggest mistake.
And finish him off.
No. We had to assume disguises almost to fit in and to not stand out and make ourselves too obvious. I became like the girls at school. I pretended I had a southern accent. I got a perm. I started wearing lip gloss, and I lied. I lied about our past, why we had moved there, what had happened to my father, what was wrong with his face. You know, when you tell a lie for long enough and it sort of becomes your reality, those people that lived in Cape Cod, that little girl and my dad and all of us, they really did disappear. I mean, we relocated to Tennessee, but the people that we were are gone forever.
The first couple of years that we lived in Tennessee, we watched very carefully. We lived in a very isolated area. John watched cars that went by the house to see if they slowed down. And that finally wore away. It went away. He kind of looked like the old John, except for the fact that he had this huge mountain man beard. I believe that John needed that type of place for a healing process. We lived on a large farm. He did a lot of work on that farm when he was physically able. He split wood we would never need, just for the physical smashing of an axe through a piece of something.
From time to time, I had to return to Boston for surgery, and that meant shaving my beard off. And every time I shaved my beard off, I would see what they had done to me, and the anger would just come flooding back. While I was up in Boston, I visited my uncle. He always called me nephew. He said, "Nephew, come down in the cellar. I got something I want to show you." We went down the cellar. He opened up a gun case, and there was a .22 caliber rifle. It had a scope on it, and on the end of it was a silencer. It was everything I needed. I looked at the gun my uncle had put together. I wrote a few words in my notebook and showed it to him. "Thank you for all your effort. I won't need it."
When John returned from that surgery, he came through the door, and before he said hello or anything else, he looked me straight in the eye and he said, "I'm done. I'm done with surgery. I'm done with going back there. I'm really done." And I said, "I'm done too." I really felt we had turned a corner, that he was leaving the revenge and his hatred behind, and that he was going to embrace his family and his life. We were heading forward with the person that John grew into to be the man he is today.
In 2003, there was actually a break in my dad's case. There was a confession. The Rainies had started turning on each other, fighting over money, and they'd gone into the police and started spilling family secrets. 24 years after my dad's shooting, John Rainey finally came clean. He placed the entire blame for my dad's shooting on his brother, Melvin Rainey.
Melvin's brother told the whole story of the night of John's shooting. Melvin sat in the back seat. He had a ski mask on, according to his brother. He had a shotgun, which he put out the back window. As they slowly passed John's Volkswagen, he shot a round from the shotgun, which went through John's face. In a sense, it was vindication. John was right. All those years he'd been right. It was Melvin Rainey who wanted him dead.
They remain unpunished, and they will remain unpunished because the statute of limitations...
The sad part of this vindication was the fact that it came to light after the statute of limitations, so no legal process would happen. In some ways, Melvin did get punished.
Melvin is in a state institution. He has what is reported to be Pick's disease, which is a disease that affects the brain. I'm told that he's in a state of dementia. You know, what goes around comes around. He's getting what's rightly his, I guess.
This is the only childhood I had. To have lived through it and be here today, I just feel like it's made me who I am. It's touched every part of my life. I write books for kids. I'm a mom and I'm a wife. Well, I can't think of anything else that I would... Yeah, I have it all.
Quite frequently, I compare what has happened to Melvin and what I'm going through now. There's no doubt in my mind that I won. No question.
We now live
suicide. So sadly, you put yourself in a mode of what you have to do.
Stunned by the news, Barb raced to Ron's house in Toledo.
He started out telling me that Rhonda was a very sadistic, cruel person.
Was he devastated by Rhonda's death?
No.
He's not showing any remorse to you? Are there any tears?
No.
And then, out of the bedroom, walked Ron's ex-wife in a bathrobe.
She spent the night with Rhonda's husband in Rhonda's bed 12 feet away from where her body laid.
You'd been told it was a suicide. What do you think to yourself at that moment?
At that point, I knew he had killed my child.
Prior into the death of Rhonda Reynolds.
The purpose of any hearing, fact-finding, or investigation is one thing, and that is the truth.
In the 13 long years since her daughter's death, Barb Thompson had dedicated her life for this day. What are your hopes as this is about to begin?
That the jury gets to hear the evidence that's out there, they get to hear everything and the truth, and they come to an honest verdict.
The standard of beyond a reasonable doubt that is required in criminal courts does not apply here in this inquest.
Lewis County Coroner Warren McLeod presides over...
Conducting a homicide is like putting together a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. What happens if one piece doesn't fit, then the rest of the puzzle won't make sense. You got to take it apart, and that's what they did. The victim was Benji Novak.
He had been beaten bad on the torso. His head was almost overkill.
This case was twisted, even for Miami. Benji was from a rich Miami family. They owned the Fontainebleau Hotel. It was big back in the 60s.
He was king of all the world. And my daddy owns this place, and you'll do as I tell you to do.
He had a lot of enemies.
He was a cutthroat.
To put it bluntly, he was a brat. He wanted people to fear him.
Benji was a successful businessman, and if people needed to be held accountable, he had no problem doing it, and that's the arrogance that a lot of people saw in him.
He had a lot of fetishes. He had the second largest Batman collection in the world.
He became very wealthy in his own right. He managed conventions. He would set them up from the beginning to the end.
It was an all-cash business. He was scared to death he was going to be robbed.
He always claimed to be a little sexually kinky.
Prostitutes and strip clubs, and that's in fact where he met his wife, Narcy.
He definitely was in love with Narcy. Benji was who he was. His wife was who she was. If they did things, that was between them.
We really pound the pavement on this case. It was apparent that they wanted him to suffer.
Who would go to such lengths to inflict such serious injury?
Somebody with a really cold heart, I can tell you that.
was a lot of cast of characters. We found hitmen. We found girlfriends. We found money trails.
And when it was all over, the oldest motive in the world, money and sex.
I'm Troy Roberts. Tonight on 48 Hours. Crazy Love.
My God, I can't believe this. It was horrific.
Detective Sergeant Terry Wilson of the Rybrook, New York Police Department.
He's on the ground. He's basically hogtied.
And Detective Allison Carpentier of Westchester County had never witnessed a crime scene this gruesome.
It was a brutal scene. His eyes had both been cut out.
The victim, 53-year-old Benji Novak, was a multimillionaire Florida businessman. His mutilated body was discovered in the early morning hours of July 12, 2009, in a hotel room in Rybrook, a suburb just 40 minutes north of New York City.
A tape like this
Right.
was placed on his legs, his arms, and around his mouth. When they put it, they did it really tight.
Police believed there was more than one killer.
Was there any sign of struggle?
He was in the bed. They came up on him. They hit him multiple times, maybe a dozen times or so.
Police learned from Benji's wife, Narcy Novak, that she and her husband were from South Florida. They were at the Rye, New York hotel all weekend, running a large Amway convention.
As police in New York began their investigation, they soon learned their victim, Benji Novak, came from a fascinating background. His parents once owned the famous Fontainebleau Hotel, once the hottest spot on Miami Beach in the swinging 60s.
It was absolutely magnificent. The glamour, the people that were there, from all over the world. It was just incredible.
Michael Aller, a director of tourism for Miami Beach, knows everybody.
I lived at the Fontainebleau Hotel. It was just the place to be and to be seen.
The Fontainebleau was the creation of Benji's parents, Bernice and Ben Novak. They were Miami Beach royalty, and everybody from JFK to Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack stayed at their hotel.
It was like Vegas, really. He rubbed shoulders with everybody there.
Maxine Field was Benji's aunt. She spent a lot of time at the hotel with her sister Bernice.
It was amazing. They had the stairway to nowhere, which was like some kind of thing for the brides that would walk down. It would look like it was just coming out of the clouds. Everybody wanted to see what Mrs. Novak was wearing. She always had to go down and look absolutely better than anyone else. Ben wanted that. She was part of the Fontainebleau.
But Ben and Bernice's son Benji was not as charming as his famous parents.
He was a loner. He was a little prince. Ben was very secretive in many ways. He was not at ease with people. He would go trick-or-treating with a chauffeur, and no kids went with him.
I knew the Novaks. I knew Benji. Benji was not a nice man. He was a tough, I want it now type of guy. He was not pleasant to deal with. I was the only one that could really confront him and say that because I've known him from when he was this big.
What did you make? Joe Matthews, a former Miami Beach homicide detective, also knew Benji.
Everybody, as a young boy, were intimidated by him because he would fire housemaids or valet people or whatever he wanted to. He had complete control of the hotel.
Sound like a tyrant.
He was, and he wasn't really an easy guy to like. He was attracted to all the cops. He spent all of his time at the police station.
So he aspired to be a police officer.
For all intents and purposes, he thought he was a police officer.
While the Prince of the Fontainebleau played cop, his father's entire empire started collapsing. He lost the hotel to bankruptcy in 1977. Benji was so distraught, he refused to ever drive past the landmark again. His father's failures, though, fueled his ambitions, and at 22, he started his own empire.
He was an ambitious man. Extremely ambitious.
Charlie Serrater is a former police officer and one of Benji's best friends. He watched Benji become a millionaire several times over with his convention staging business.
He became a wealthy man at a very young age.
Yes, he did. I'm not surprised at that, and I'm sure a big chunk of it was cash that he kept.
Why cash?
I know he always had a lot of cash. He kept a lot of cash in the house, and he spent it on himself quite freely.
In 1991, Benji began sharing his good fortune with Narcy Valise, a young single mother from Ecuador, a former exotic dancer with a young child, May Abad. The two married, and eventually Narcy helped Ben run the business, as did May. In fact, both women were with Benji at the convention the weekend he was murdered. It was attended by more than 1,000 people, and that made the investigation tricky.
You had a hotel full of possible suspects.
Right. And we didn't know which way to go. Is this a robbery? Is it domestic gone wrong? Is it isolated? Is he a target?
Police soon established a timeline from phone records. Benji was alive at 6:54 a.m.
We know Ben was alive because he receives a phone call from a worker in the hotel saying there was a problem, there was overcrowding for breakfast.
Narcy left the room to sort out the seating problem in the dining room. You can see her on video, down there at around 7:17 a.m. 30 minutes later, she told police she returned to the room and discovered Ben's body.
Describe her demeanor for me.
I think the first thing she said to me, did Ben have a heart attack? Meanwhile, she had seen him. There was blood everywhere in this room. I mean, it was a bloody mess. And I kept saying to her, Narcy, I saw Ben tied up, what do you mean, did he have a heart attack? It was Sunday. Their convention was over. So if anybody involved in the convention was our killers, they would definitely be leaving.
In the hours after the murder of Benji Novak, detectives Allison Carpentier and Terry Wilson were talking to as many people as they could.
Show me when you see Narcy.
Investigators videotaped this hotel guest who encountered Narcy in the hallway minutes after she said she had just discovered Benji's body.
When you were there, she said, my husband, help me.
He told police that Narcy was acting suspicious.
And she looked like a surprise.
Right.
And that he noticed the door to the room didn't show any signs of a break-in.
How come you noticed no damage?
Right.
In fact, neither of the doors to the Novak suite showed any signs of forced entry. So then police looked at the card key history leading up to the murder.
What did the card key records show?
They showed that there were no card keys used to enter that room between, say, 5 after 12 at night and 7:40 in the morning.
At 7:45, a card swipe is logged. That card swipe was from Narcy's key.
And that's when she supposedly discovers the body. It was obvious that he'd been sleeping when he was attacked. So he didn't believe he had walked to the door and opened the door up to somebody.
So how did the killers gain access to Benji's room?
The only one else that had access to that room was Narcy.
In her interview the day after the murder, Narcy tells police she's not sure if she closed the door when she left Benji to go downstairs to the dining room.
I don't have anything to do with opening the door intentionally for anybody.
Tell me about the interview that you conducted.
With Narcy? It lasted hours. She wouldn't go to the bathroom. She didn't want a glass of water. She didn't want a coffee. She held her own all night.
I have no clue what happened. I have nothing to do with my husband's death.
Narcy was emphatic.
I love my husband.
She had always loved Benji. The couple had met almost 2 decades earlier on an unlikely first date.
When he met her, she was a nude dancer in a kind of a sleazy strip joint in Hialeah. To me, she looked like a girl that worked the streets and worked her way up to be a nude dancer.
Worked her way up to be a nude dancer.
That's Joe's opinion.
Narcy's life had been a far cry from Benji's privileged past at the Fontainebleau.
And were they in love?
He definitely was in love with Narcy, yes.
Charlie Serrator was close to both Benji and Narcy for almost 2 decades. The couple even attended Serrator's wedding.
And do you believe Narcy was in love with him?
I would believe in the beginning, yes.
Because of Benji, Narcy was afforded an extravagant lifestyle.
They lived in a multi-million-dollar estate. She drove expensive cars. She had furs, beautiful jewelry. She enjoyed the best of the best.
And as Benji's convention business grew and grossed millions, he splurged on one of his childhood fantasies.
I think he was probably one of the biggest collectors of Batman memorabilia.
His prized possession, a replica of the 1960s Batmobile.
I guess, he could afford it.
Stacks and stacks and stacks of first edition toys.
Anything related to the superheroes.
And friends say, collecting memorabilia wasn't Benji's only indulgence. Benji had an appetite for other women.
Benji didn't care. He was a party boy that thought for the moment.
Was he always cheating?
He was always cheating.
Did Narcy know?
Narcy always suspected Ben of cheating. She was a very jealous woman.
And early on, before Ben and Narcy were married, Charlie Serrater got a taste of Narcy's jealousy.
Benji had received a phone call, and she was extremely upset, and she was threatening to burn his house down. And he was pleading with her that he's not cheating.
But cheating was just the beginning. Benji's sexual taste could have been ripped right from the pages of the most recent erotic bestsellers.
I know he was into bondage.
Narcy tells us he likes to be tied up.
Benji was who he was. Let's say this. Nobody really knows what goes on behind closed doors.
But it's what happened behind this closed door that concerns homicide detective Allison Carpentier.
That is found in a way that he enjoys sexually.
Carpentier asked Narcy about the couple's bondage games and the strange coincidence of finding Benji bound and tied.
Narcy, don't you think it's caught? He dies in a position that he finds sexually arousing. When I last met, he was not tied up.
When you would confront her with allegations, she would just not really respond to it at all. It was odd.
Then from police in Florida, detectives got a tip about a bizarre incident involving bondage.
We learned that she had tied him up and stole, he says, between $300,000 and $400,000.
In 2002, Benji was the victim of a home invasion that, according to him, was orchestrated by Narcy.
He called me up, and he said he had just been robbed. He says, I've been tied up in a chair for 25 hours, and I think my wife was involved.
Why would Narcy stage this home invasion and rob him?
She was fed up with him, fed up with cheating, fed up with everything, and wanted to prove a point.
For reasons unknown, Benji never pressed charges, and amazingly, the couple reconciled.
After all is said and done, he went back with her because he loved her.
But the similarities of the 2002 incident and Benji's murder 7 years later convinced investigators to turn up the heat on Narcy.
You want me to ask you straight out? Did you have any involvement in your husband's death? No. There is an electrical chair. And I'm a suspect. Give it to me right now. Put me out of my misery. I want to die.
She tried to act like a grieving widow. It didn't come off like that at all to any of the investigators, I don't think.
But if Narcy was involved in Benji's death, what could be her motive?
I think she knew she was going to be replaced.
Detective Carpentier learned that Benji had taken up with another woman.
He was sort of looking for a bad girl, but I was too bad of a girl for him.
Rebecca Bliss, formerly known as Mona Love, was all over the internet.
She admits being a prostitute, pornographic movies.
What began as a sexual tryst, says Rebecca, grew into a serious, ongoing relationship of 2 years.
He used to make me laugh every day, and talking to him about personal things.
Benji moved her from Miami, where she was dancing in a strip club, to a condominium in Fort Lauderdale.
He cared about me a lot. He would tell me he loved me every day, all day.
With Rebecca in the wings, was Benji about to leave Narcy?
She called me, screaming at me, yelling at me.
Not if Narcy Novak had anything to do with it.
She said if she couldn't have him, no one will.
In the days after Benji Novak's murder, detectives began casting a wider net.
And the investigation would start to expand. We knew that we had to go to Florida.
In Fort Lauderdale, detectives began to piece together Benji's life, uncovering his complicated connections to several women and their relationships with each other.
We found a family in turmoil.
There was no love lost between Benji's wife Narcy and his mother Bernice.
And what was Narcy's relationship like with Bernice?
From day one, extremely strained.
It was like that up until the day Bernice tragically passed away after a fall just 3 months earlier.
His mom did not like his wife. They really hated each other.
The direct opposite of a very close bond between Bernice and Benji.
And he would talk to his mother daily, so he obviously was a loving son. And he stayed very close with his mother up until her death.
Then there was May Abad, Narcy's daughter from a previous marriage.
May was shipped off to different people throughout her life. She lived with aunts, she lived with friends.
May was just 10 years old when Benji and Narcy got together.
May and her mother had a pretty stormy mother-daughter relationship.
Miami Herald reporter Julie Brown has written extensively about the Novak murder case and was a consultant for CBS News.
Having a 10-year-old daughter at the time that she met Ben really wasn't very convenient for Narcy.
Over the years, May grew close to Benji, considering him the father that she never had. And just after Benji's murder, she became convinced her mother may have played a role in his death.
She said, it's the worst thing in the world to have to believe that your mother might have killed your father. And she said that she believed that her mother did do it.
And the motive was?
Money. It was money.
Narcy was the sole beneficiary of Benji's estate, then valued between $5 and $10 million.
I think Narcy's very smart. She knows how to manipulate people. She will do whatever it takes to get what she needs.
Just 3 days after the murder, Narcy and May, now back in Florida at the Novak's waterfront home, had an ugly confrontation recorded on surveillance camera.
May had gone there to collect some of her things she had in a guest cottage on the property, and Narcy took a crowbar and started chasing her around with the crowbar.
I got a hysterical phone call sometime around 6 o'clock.
Concerned for May's safety, Charlie Serrator raced to Benji's home.
And when I pulled up, May and Narcy were yelling at each other. May was screaming at her, "You murdered Ben." And at that point, a crowbar came into it. And they just went at each other, and I split them up.
But not before Narcy whacked May with the crowbar.
You have to go where your evidence leads you. It just kept leading back to Narcy.
Despite all their suspicions, police didn't have enough hard evidence to charge Narcy. Then, out of the blue, 10 days after the murder, investigators received a bombshell anonymous letter that would change everything.
Translated from Spanish, it read in part, "This crime, without a doubt, was committed by the wife of Mr. Novak and her brother." Narcy's brother, Cristobal, was a bus driver in Pennsylvania.
So we drove down to Philadelphia, where Cristobal lived.
Detectives interviewed him in his apartment. Cristobal denied knowing anything about Benji's murder.
As we entered, it's a small kitchen area. There was a table there, and he invited us to sit down at the table.
And detectives couldn't help but notice what was on that table.
It was littered with papers, and part of the papers were Western Union receipts. It's just we couldn't believe it.
Cristobal had been wiring money to various people. When he left the room for a moment, detectives made note of some of the payees.
There was one name that proved very helpful.
Yes, Alejandro Garcia.
Alejandro Garcia of Miami had been wired $500 by Cristobal just 1 month after Benji's murder. Detectives wondered if that was payment for the hit on Benji.
Alejandro only had one eye, so a search of the database in Florida led us to Alejandro Garcia.
It turns out Garcia had a record, and with his mugshot in hand, detectives pored over the Rybrook Hotel surveillance tapes from that fateful weekend. There's Benji, captured by the security cameras.
I had detectives go over and over and over the video at the Hilton.
And they hit...
Taped on his legs, his mouth was covered.
In the park...
Rogan. Rogan? Rogan?